All right, let's talk about one of the most fundamental ingredients in your kitchen. You know, the one that can totally make or break your baking? Yeah, we're talking about flour. And today we're going to demystify it so you can take your baking to the next level. Let's get right into it. Okay, be honest. Have you ever been there? You follow a recipe perfectly. I mean, down to the gram. You've kneaded, you've proved, you've done everything by the book. And what do you get? A sad, dense brick instead of that gorgeous, airy loaf you were dreaming of. It is just the most frustrating feeling, right? But here's the thing. What if the problem isn't you? What if it's not your technique at all? The secret, the key to fixing these common baking heartbreaks, it's all about understanding what's actually going on inside that bag of flour.
So to really get a handle on this, we've got to go back to the very beginning. I'm talking about the wheat berry itself. And it turns out it's actually pretty simple. You can break down pretty much any wheat into just two basic rules.
Okay, rule number one is all about hardness. You've got your hard wheat, which is packed with protein. That protein is what gives you the strong gluten you need for those amazing chewy yeast breads. Then you've got soft wheat. It's got less protein, which makes it perfect for really delicate things like cakes and pastries. So just remember, hard wheat for that good chew, soft wheat for a tender crumb.
And rule number two, it's all about color. Now, this one doesn't really change the structure of your bake, but whoa, does it have a massive impact on the taste. Red wheat, that's going to give you that classic, nutty, really robust whole wheat flavor we all know. But white wheat, it's way, way milder. So mild, in fact, that a lot of people can't even tell the difference when you swap it for regular all-purpose flour. Kind of cool, right?
So how do we turn that grain into the flour we buy? Well, there are basically two ways it's done. On one hand, you have modern roller milling. It's super efficient, super fast, and gives you a really fine, consistent flour that lasts forever on the shelf. But then, you have traditional stone milling. It's a much slower, cooler process, and because of that, it holds on to more of the grain's natural oils and nutrients. The result? Way more flavor, but it won't last as long. It's that classic trade-off, you know? Speed versus flavor and nutrition.
All right, so we've got the basics of the wheat grain down. Now let's get into the really good stuff, the nitty-gritty. We're going to decode the two numbers on the bag that will tell you basically everything you need to know about how powerful your flour is. And those two numbers are protein and ash. Okay, first up is the one you've probably heard a million times, protein. Honestly, protein content is the most important thing for developing gluten. Just think about it. When you mix flour and water, those proteins start linking up, forming this incredible elastic network. That network is what traps all the little gas bubbles from the yeast, and that's what gives bread its structure, its amazing rise, and that super satisfying chewy texture we all love. And you can see this difference so clearly when you look at the flours on the shelf. You've got cake flour way down on the low end, around 7 to 9% protein. That's why cakes are so tender. All-purpose flour is kinda your jack-of-all-trades, right in the middle. And then you've got bread flour, which we call strong flour. That stuff is clocking in at 12, sometimes even 16% protein. All that extra protein is why it's the absolute go-to for big, crusty artisan breads that need a ton of structure.
But listen up, because this is a huge tip, and it trips up so many people. The higher the protein, the thirstier the flour is. It just soaks up way more water. And that is exactly why you can't just swap bread flour for all-purpose in a recipe and call it a day. If you don't add more liquid, your dough is going to be a dry, unworkable mess. Seriously, remember that one.
Okay, let's move on to a number you might not be so familiar with, ash content. And this is a really fascinating one. Think of it like this. It's basically a secret code for how much of the whole grain, you know, the really nutritious bran and germ, is still left in your flour. So a higher ash content means you're getting more minerals, more nutrition, and you guessed it, a whole lot more flavor.
I know, the name ash content sounds super weird, right? Like, are they putting ash in my flour? No, it's not an ingredient. It actually comes from a lab test. They take a little sample of flour and, well, they literally burn it at a super high temperature. All the organic stuff burns away, and what's left behind is just the mineral residue. That's the ash. And by weighing it, they know exactly how much of that good, mineral-rich stuff from the grain is still in your flour.
And if you want to see this in action, just look at the French flour system. It's the perfect example. They don't even really bother with protein percentages. They classify their flour based on ash content, using what they call a T number. So a T55, that's a very refined white flour with low ash, it's perfect for baguettes. But a T110? That's a much darker, more whole-grain flour with a high ash number, and it's what you'd use for those big, rustic country loaves. It's a totally brilliant system, and it's all about the minerals.
Okay, get ready, because this next part might just be the biggest aha moment of this whole thing. We are about to blow up a very common and what seems like a very logical baking myth.
So the thinking goes like this. More protein equals more gluten, and more gluten equals a bigger, taller, fluffier loaf of bread. Makes sense, right? But as one of our sources points out, this is exactly where a lot of those baking comparison videos you see online get it wrong. The real answer is, well, it's not that simple.
Because here's the real secret. Flour's strength isn't just about the quantity of protein, it's about the quality of that protein and, this is the most important part, how you develop it. You can have the highest protein flour in the world, but it's like having a Ferrari engine. If you don't know how to build the car around it and actually drive the thing, you're not going anywhere.
So let's imagine a scenario that seems to make 0 sense. You bake 2 loaves of bread side by side. One is with a 13% protein flour, the other with a 14% protein flour. So how in the world could the loaf with the stronger flour, the 14% one, actually end up smaller and denser? What's going on?
Well, the answer is this amazing paradox. That super strong 14% flour creates a gluten network that is just incredibly tight and powerful. For that network to become extensible, that's the fancy word for stretchy and able to expand, it needs 2 things: more water to relax and more mixing time to develop properly. If you don't give it enough of both, that gluten structure becomes like a steel cage. It's so tight that it literally traps the dough and won't let it expand. It chokes its own rind.
So if unlocking a flour's potential is all about how you develop it, what's the ultimate test? Sourdough, of course. So let's check out this really cool experiment to see how all these ideas play out in the real world. They took 5 different starters, fed each one a different flour, and then used them to bake otherwise identical loaves.
And the results are just wow. The single choice of what flour to feed the starter completely changed everything about the final loaf. We're talking crumb, texture, flavor, all of it was different. It just goes to show you, a starter isn't just there to make the bread rise. It is a huge, huge contributor to the final flavor and texture of your bread.
So what did we learn? Well, the rye starter was like a beast. Super active fermentation, giving the bread this great earthy flavor. The whole wheat starter, that gave the most complex, tangy flavor, though the loaf was a little bit denser. And what about the good all-purpose starter? It was the slowest to get going, but in the end, it made the tallest loaf with that beautiful open crumb and a classic mild taste. The big takeaway here is that there's no single best flour. It's all about picking the right tool for the job you want to do.
So, next time you're in the baking aisle, staring at that giant wall of flour, it's not going to be a mystery anymore. You're not just guessing, you can read the bag, you can understand the numbers, you know what the grain means, and you can make a choice that's right for what you want to bake. You now have the knowledge to pick the perfect flour for your perfect loaf. So the only real question left is, what are you going to bake next?